Hey, what's going on? Lewis here from Podcast Domination. And on this episode, if you're looking to grow your podcast and you want someone to do it for you, if you want a done for you service, if you want somebody to take you by the hand, tell you what's going on with your podcast, give you the steps, the tools, and also do it for you, meaning they're going to go and run whatever traffic sources they find necessary and effective to grow your podcast. This is going to be the episode for you because I have with me a guy who has started the world's first dedicated podcast promotion service. And this gentleman's name is Daniel Page. Daniel Page is the chief plugger at Earplug PR over at earplugpr.com. And he and I today talk about, this is an episode we did in 2020, just at the end of the year. But I was super pumped to get him on because he's doing something in the space that is just not being done right now. So in this episode, you're going to learn really and truly, this is going to be for people who are launching a show, who have already launched, who are looking to find new growth methods. He's going to share exactly what's working right now, exactly what the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to their launch and their promotion, and how he would go about launching a podcast right now with all the knowledge he has in terms of what it takes to grow a podcast. So without further ado, actually before I do that, Daniel was also super kind, and he actually gave all of us a 10% discount. If you head over to earplugpr.com, that's earplugpr.com, and use the voucher code Domination, just one word, Domination, you'll get 10% off. And this expires at the end of January 2021, this month. So make sure you use it fast and enjoy this episode. Let me know how you like it. And you'll learn more about what they do over at Earplug through this episode. Enjoy. Thanks for coming on today. The reason why I brought you on is because you're doing something in the industry that is pretty much unheard of in terms of like how you're helping people with podcasting. And it's funny because we get questions around the stuff that you offer and how you help people all the time. Growing podcasts is probably one of the biggest questions I get. And there's too many people out there to help. And a friend of mine sent me the link to your website a couple of months ago. And I was really interested in just like trying to understand how you're doing it, what got you into this and all that stuff. So I wanted to share share you with more people who are listening to this. So first of all, thanks for making the time because I know it's quite late over there in the UK.
No problem. No, thanks for having me.
Welcome. So I guess for those who don't know, I'm sure that's a lot of people listening. Tell us a little bit about Earplug. I know you said you guys are like 6 weeks old, so this is like a very new project. But yeah, tell us a little bit about Earplug and then also how you got into this. I'm sure there's a bit of a backstory there as well.
Yeah. So let's start with the story. So I'm also a content producer. I also make podcasts professionally through a production company. We do a mix of comedy and factual. And so I was working on the content and doing all the things that I think, people would typically do when they come to and get that podcast launched and promoted and marketed. And I thought, well, I need a little bit of help with this. I want a little bit of support with the work I'm doing for me and for my clients. So went on the net, tried to Google who could help me, came up blank. There's a lot of advice sites out there. There's a lot of, great shows like yours that are offering some brilliant advice for the stuff that you can do yourself. But in terms of a professional service to basically help you promote, market, and grow your podcast or your client's podcast in a really structured way, couldn't find it, really confused. So I looked down the PR route and tried to find PR agencies who specialize in podcasts. And I found a couple of those. They're really good at what they do. I phoned them up, I had a really lovely conversation. Then they started talking about money. And this is where my jaw hit the floor. Yeah. So they were saying that they would want around $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a minimum of 3 months.
Yeah, that can get expensive quickly.
Holy crap! So unless you're a big brand, that's a lot of cash. And I feel quite passionate about the little guy working with smaller podcasters and talent hasn't broken through yet to help them succeed.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a real moment, and I saw that, and nonetheless, I said, okay, well, in theory, though, could you work with my show? And they said, we need to think about it, which was another confusing thing. They said, let us take it away and think about it. So it wasn't just about the money. And then they come back to me later on, and they basically said, we're not going to take on your show. Second jaw hitting the floor moment. And I looked into it, and essentially we didn't have a big enough celebrity for them to promote.
Right.
So they wanted $12,000+ and a celebrity before they would work with us.
Yeah.
And I thought 99% of podcasts out there don't have $12,000 and a celebrity. So where's the service that works for that 99%?
Right. It's a lot of sweat equity. And then, I've had conversations, I'm sure you have too, with other smaller podcasters where it's like, how do we grow? Or even a company that's well established and they're like, how do we grow? Like, they're probably not going to drop $12,000 into promoting a podcast that has for the most part, no foreseeable ROI to it. It just doesn't make sense. Even if you're really passionate, most people will not spend that kind of money. So, which is, awesome, because out of it came Earplug, and out of it came a lot of different things that you guys are doing now. So I'm really curious, like, how did that start? So you had those conversations, you realized this is obviously a bigger problem, not just you that you were having, but everyone in the industry. What was the next step in terms of creating Earplug, and how did you kind of come up with the marketing strategies that you guys use now? And I'm happy to chat about those if you want.
Yeah. So, I guess it's my personality. If I see a problem, I solve it. And I think, the kind of the attitude around just making things happen is a really big attitude that's important for podcasters around the world. And that the organic industry and the lack of a publishing medium, podcasting opened up a medium for everybody. It was a democratization of audio production. And so in that spirit, I said to myself, well, let's build something using my knowledge and experience from my marketing promotion experience today, but also reaching out. And I'm a huge fan of reaching out and making partnerships. And again, in the podcasting community, I think it's a really important thing to do. Yep. So I reached out to PR experts, to marketing experts, people who worked in journalism. I started talking to other people working in this space who were doing bits of the solutions. There's lots of companies out there doing a little bit of each of the things that we're doing, but nobody's doing that one dedicated service that we're offering. And I found that amazing. So I brought together all of these people, these interests. So we're working at the moment with people like Castro, Podcast Republic, Pod Bible, Podkite, and each of these organizations are doing something brilliant in their own right. But if we work with them and bring that to the wider audience as part of a wider service offering, suddenly things get really interesting.
Exactly.
So I built it, I trialed it, I worked it, and got our first customers pretty quickly. And now we're just constantly iterating and optimizing around what we're seeing our audience needs. So just this week, I updated our standard packages because I was seeing a trend whereby what the audience needed was falling into sort of 3 distinct buckets of support. And I've also been doing surveys. I did a survey, so I offered a discount on my service if you do my survey, and that gave me a lot of information about what people needed. And what was really interesting was that a lot of people just don't have the time to do all the good things they should be doing. A lot of people maybe have the time, but just don't have the confidence or the knowledge. And a lot of people can see there's so many options out there. I've been listening to your show. There's so many good things you can do, but it's almost, which one do I pick? How do I know where to start?
Yeah.
So there's almost a lot of people who just either don't have the time, don't have the knowledge, or don't have an understanding of how to grasp onto it because it's such a big piece. So we wanted to work for that community, but also we wanted to be able to work for brands. So we actually have packages specifically for podcasters on a really tight budget who want to access some of these services, but also brands with a bit more money, but who don't necessarily have that expertise. And big brands don't know too much about podcasts a lot of the time. The expertise that people like you have and your colleagues have and your listeners have, you'll be surprised how much you know compared to some of the bigger brands. Mm-hmm. So offering that service to the big brands is also something we're doing. So it's a lot going on right now. It's a big thing. It's moving quite fast, but I think we've suddenly created something that could be quite powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And hence why I think I caught eye of it. And kind of automatically saw the value of it, what you were bringing. So let's get into it a little bit. I think one of the first questions I have, I know, like you mentioned, you've partnered with a lot of the different people and providers in the industry who are doing great things in their own space, but it's only one of the pieces, and they're doing it brilliantly. But like, if you bring them all together, it's where you make the most impact. From your experience and from what you're seeing on your end, what is moving the needle the most when it comes to helping podcasters get more listeners to their show? And we can kind of parse this out as like, is it, from what you're seeing, is it more of like articles and helping them get featured in articles about their podcast? Is it emails and getting in front of email lists? Is it Facebook ads? Like, I'd love to just kind of dive in and see like what's working for your clients the most.
So I'm gonna answer that question in two ways if I can. And the first answer is going to be a little bit controversial, and the second answer is going to be a little bit more traditional. So my first answer is listeners and downloads are a great metric for measuring the success of your podcast, because it's tangible, because you can measure it, because it gives you a feeling for how well you're doing. But my challenge back to podcasters listening out there is downloads are not the only fruit. Like, the success of your podcast is not always linked to the downloads that you receive. And I think the first thing I'd say is that, yes, we can help with downloads, but we can also help with a wider piece. And one of the first questions I ask my clients is, what do you want to achieve? Why does your podcast exist? Is it because you enjoy podcasting? Is it because you want to reach an audience and share a message? Is it because you want to raise your profile? Is it because you want to do it because it's a thing that you feel is important for your brand, that you have that outreach mechanism, but isn't necessarily there to bring a certain number of clicks through? So one of the things we have to say is, yes, downloads are important, but what I want to do is work with clients and understand what is most important to them and how do we support that. So that might be we work with them to improve their profile in the press. And I think this thing about what's important to them and why their podcast exists is something that's really important in general, because if you don't understand those two things as a creator, it's hard to promote your show if you don't know what your ultimate goal is for that promotions prospect and that process campaign.
Yeah. That's a great question. That's a great way to frame it, because we've had clients that they don't care how many downloads they get.
Right.
They just want to talk to people who are great and share the content with their audience. And there's others who just, for other reasons, they don't care. So that's a great reframe. So what's the second? I need to, this is going to be two-part answer.
Yeah.
So, what's the second
so if we do want listeners, then it's interesting. And I know that one of the good answers is it varies by podcast, clearly. But one of the things that I'm finding quite powerful right now, and I wouldn't say they're silver bullets, but maybe they're bronze bullets, is I'm finding that if you go and work with partners like Podcast Republic and Castro, you can go direct to them. You can come through us, or you can go direct to them. And they've got some pretty good rates in terms of dollar per subscriber for some of their premium listings. So if you get a premium listing with someone like Castro, someone like Podcast Republic, you're going to see a pretty good ROI, maybe sort of $1 to $3 per subscriber, which I think is pretty good going, to be honest.
That is good.
So I'd say, don't be afraid to drop a few dollars on a premium listing, because frankly, there's so many podcasts. Getting a top spot, standing out is one of the most important points. Discoverability, we were talking about discoverability as an issue. Maybe put your dollars there. That'd be number one tip. And the second thing I'm finding is really powerful, certainly with the work that I'm doing at the moment, is a high quality Facebook advert. So not any old Facebook advert, but a really high quality one that's really targeted. It really demonstrates the value that you offer to the audience who needs that value. And it does so in a way that's really engaging. So for me at the moment, I'm using audiograms, boosted audiograms on Facebook. And that's getting me a pretty insane click-through rate and cost per click compared to a standard advert. It's like maybe 3x better, 3x better.
Got it.
That for me is really important, but it's key. It has to be targeted. It has to be only once you've understood your audience and the messaging around the value that you offer, can you get to the point of that 3x improvement on Facebook.
Got it. So the messaging has to be dialed in, meaning the people you're reaching have to be receptive. You've got to know that audience really, really well. And you said you mentioned like it's dialed in, so you're boosting the content, not making an ad from the get-go, or do I have that mixed up?
So an audiogram, hopefully you're familiar with that, is essentially where you can sync the audio with some imagery and that animation. And importantly, vitally, whenever you do an audiogram, make sure you have the text coming up on the screen in sync to the audio.
Got it.
Because people don't necessarily listen with the sound on. Got it. So creating a 30-second audiogram and boosting that on Facebook, and that's make it a clip from your show that you think is representative of your show, that you think demonstrates the value that your show has for your listeners.
So you're promoting one episode, essentially. It's not the whole podcast. You're picking one episode.
Well, you can then
audiogram.
Yes, but you can link back to the whole podcast feed,
right,
or the episode. Yeah. So you can drive that traffic to the place that you feel is going to then land that audience in the most effective way. But the point is, having that really engaging content up front stands out from a static image or just some text.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
So we're combining different disciplines in one way. And even though it sounds quite simple, I think it can be a really powerful way of reaching that audience in a really cost-effective way.
Got it. And then one last question on the Facebook ads. Are you finding, is it better to use something like a smart link and then have, when someone clicks through, they can either go to Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple, depending on their device, or is it website?
No, so it really depends on you as a client. So I'm a big fan, I'm a huge fan of landing pages on websites because they get to explore the value that your website has to offer. Mm-hmm. So what's important to you is people visiting your content as a result of the podcast, website. If what's important to you is downloads, link, smart link. So we use Podkite at the moment. So Podkite smart links are some of the best around. They allow you to customize what you offer to your listeners. So when they click through, they get to choose the player that suits them best.
Right. Yeah, you definitely want to use that instead of a just Apple or just Spotify link, because then
you're losing half your listeners if you use just Apple or just exactly.
Yeah. Good. We actually had a friend of mine, Matt Wolf from the Hustle and Flowchart podcast. They use kind of like retargeting ads on their with their podcast to drive traffic, using the same thing, using those audiograms to drive people who land on their website, and they go off on Facebook. They're going to get with retargeting ads that are basically mini clips from the podcast. So that's it's people listening and wondering what the episode was. I don't know the number. We'll have it in the show notes. So you guys can listen to it and hear Matt, but it's good to hear more people are doing that, because it seems to be working and seems to definitely be something that's on the rise for podcasts. Anything else that you think, if there's just somebody listening out there, whether it's a producer or somebody else who runs a podcast and they haven't tried something, what would be the one thing you would say, you should try this, one strategy?
I think the thing about something like a low cost. So for me, if you wanted to start out and you had a very small budget, I would literally put $2 or $3 behind a Facebook advert, watch it for a day, see what you're getting, test and adjust. So at the end of the week, you're spending $15, $20, but you know pretty quickly which of those messages is landing. And I'm talking about testing and adjusting both your message, but testing and adjusting your target audience.
Got it.
So what's called the feedback loop is so important when you're starting out and trying to work out what works best for you. And then you can take what you've learned from something like the Facebook advert and use that on a wider range of channels. Because if you start to understand the kind of copy, the kind of language, the kind of imagery that works there, that'll work on Twitter. That'll work on websites. So it's what Facebook is as much as we might hate it or we might love it. Yeah. It's a great feedback system.
Yes.
And what you need is feedback to test and adjust when you're still learning what it is the magic combination that works for your podcast.
Yeah, it's a great point. Great point. And that's the greatest way to put money behind it. A little bit of money, however much you have, or small budget, to see with speed. That way you can make those micro adjustments as you go. And then, within $20 to $30, you have a really well dialed in ad.
Right.
So that's awesome to know. Awesome. I want to take a step back for a second and just talk about mistakes, because you have a lot of people coming to you and you probably see some mistakes that they're making, or things that maybe they're just not doing that they could be doing on their own. So is there any commonalities or patterns that you're seeing when people come to you with a podcast, whether it be new or they're semi-seasoned, that you think is super helpful and things that people can do on their own? Any mistakes there?
So there's a couple. I think there's the obvious ones, which is cover art and show name need so much investment in terms of just time, if anything else, just to get them right. Like the show name is so important, so important. And the cover art, I would always pay for cover art. I'll be honest, straight off the bat. I would find someone who you trust who can do it. There are people out there who do it for a really good rate, but I would put down $100 for cover art off the bat, because that will pay dividends 100%. But outside of those two things, I'd say the number one reason that I'm seeing people maybe are struggling is, and it's going to sound a little weird maybe, but I don't think they necessarily fully appreciate their show's mission. Like, why does this show exist? So like, you create a show for you because you have a reason for creating the show. Yeah. And that reason is your reason. But the audience don't necessarily have that same reason.
Yeah.
So what is the mission of your show for the person who isn't you, the person who is going to be listening? And people sort of know, but a lot of the time they haven't really vocalized it, either in their copy or their show name, or even just when you listen to the show. It's like, I'm having a nice time, but nobody's really sure why we're here apart from we're having a nice time, which can be enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
But shows, but shows that understand 100% what they're about and the value they offer and the mission that they have, I think that laser focus means that very quickly people will start responding to that, and you'll grow quicker. So for me, that's the biggest thing I think people perhaps need to focus. I think in the States, you're probably better at that than in the UK, I must admit. I think, people like yourself have got a really clear mandate for what you're trying to do. And that's in your show description.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So yeah, like that's the show name. Oh my gosh. Like I've spent months on one name in the past when launching a podcast for people. It's like, it's frustrating, but you're right. Like it is so important. And then artwork. It's funny because we're in the middle of launching a podcast and the artwork came back today and I didn't like it. And I'm like, I could hire another guy. He's way more expensive, but he's damn good. Right. I think I'm going to do that. No. So,
right.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to go spend that extra money on this because I want to get it good. So you're totally right, man. And then to your point, the mission, so for mission for people so that they understand here, mission for you, where would that go? I mean, we can talk about that in our episodes, but where else do you think people should really make it clear?
That every fiber, every part of the show should scream about the mission. So the artwork, the show name, your show bio, your description, your marketing, your copy, your opening two sentences.
Yeah.
Like if it's like, this is the show for cyclists who want to explore the countryside. Right. Okay. We are here to help you have the best cycle ride you can. It's as simple as that. And a lot of the time that's half acknowledged, or it's half talked about, or it's like it's in the bio, but it's not in the show title, or it's talked about at the start, but it's not in the bio. So you've got to be careful it's not on the nose. You've got to be careful it's not too direct. But you've got to say very quickly, because I'm scrolling past the podcasts. I'm looking at all the podcasts because I haven't got a lot of time to listen. I'm a listener. I can listen to a lot of podcasts. There's a million of them out there, right?
Yes.
Why am I listening to yours? because you're telling me the value you're offering. You're telling me the mission. You're telling me what I get from listening to your show. And I think you talk a lot about value and recognizing the value you offer and the value you can bring to your audience. And the mission is just essentially a way of encapsulating what your value is, your value proposition is, in a sentence.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Like, we all know it, simple. Oh yeah, we should know the mission, but we don't ever take the time to vocalize it or make sure every part of the show is pointing back to that central mission for the listener. So, very good point. I want to speed through these, or not speed through these next questions, but I want to make sure we get them because I want to keep be respectful of time. If to chat about success stories for a bit. I know you guys are a young company and you're just getting started, but I'd love to hear any specific stories you have around that. Don't have to say any names, but any specifics, any around that that come to mind.
I mean, I think I'm happy to talk. I mean, I think a good example is a show that I launched a few months ago called The Pocket Astronomer, where you get to download an astronomer and a professional astronomer into your pocket, and he takes you on an audio guide of the night sky. That's the pitch, yeah. And he's like a UK TV astronomer, quite well known. We've been working on that, and we've been using a lot of the techniques that we've been developing for Earplug over the last few weeks and months. And just because it's my show, I can spend a bit more time trying different things. And this is a monthly show. This comes out monthly, and we're up against weekly shows. Now, monthly is not a good release rate for podcasts, right?
No.
And partly that's down to the Apple algorithm, which we can talk about in a minute if you like. So it's a monthly show, but we've got no budget. But I've been applying a lot of these techniques that we use at Earplug, and just yesterday I found out we were number 2 in the UK astronomy charts, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Given we've got no budget and it's a monthly release schedule.
Yeah, monthly release date is a bit hard to climb the charts with that, but wow.
So I think it goes to show actually that with a real focus of your energies on the right things, such as we talked about with that boosted audiogram piece, you can get some really good success for not a lot of money, and because the charts are actually the gradient of the charts, as in it's quite easy to accelerate up the charts for the first 100 spots. The top 10 is the hard ones to crack.
Yeah.
But if you can get your subscriber count ticking upwards, you can find yourself getting into those spots. So we've managed to find a way to get that really engaged community against that one very clear value proposition for the show connected. And for me, that's just a good vindication of the strategies that we're offering now to the wider audience.
I love that. It's a great case study because you releasing one episode a month is definitely like, you better make sure that episode's good or else people aren't coming back for a bit. So that's really, really cool to hear that. I want to, some people are more tactical on this show or listen to this show. Some people are more like, they want to hear the concepts and strategies. I'd love to hear about any kind of tools that you found, have tested out recently. We're both in this space, so I'm sure we could talk about this for a while, but any that come to mind, the top 1 or 2 that you guys been using on your end that have seen been good?
So we've actually created some of our own simple tools, not in the same traditional sense of a web-based tool, but we've created a couple of techniques and tools that we're using at the moment, which we're offering to our clients as standard. And one of them is where we're looking at how we can use different dates in the calendar as a springboard for promotion. So by that, I mean, if you have a show that is a horror show, you want to start thinking about how can I tie that into Halloween, right? It's simple stuff like that. But what we do is we actually generate a report for all of our clients that says, for the next 3 months, here are the 20 or 30 dates that you want to be working with to promote your show. And here's how to use them to promote your show.
Interesting.
And it's simple, but it's really powerful. And everyone who's using it is going, wow, this is super easy. This is super good, because now all I do is look at my calendar and go, today I should be working off this and promoting in that way. And so again, it comes down to, I mean, you can do it if you have the time.
Yeah.
But we do it for you and take away that challenge for you. And we do it professionally. So I think that's a really powerful thing. That's number one. That is what I'm using. And number two, I mentioned it before, but Podkite has given me two really important things. So podkite.com is giving me that single link that I can click on that will then take my listener to a choice of how to listen, so they can pick their preferred player.
Right.
Low friction. I know one of your guests before has talked about low friction being really important. But also it gives me quite powerful charting options. It can tell me my chart position in different countries over time for different players. And the reason is that's important is A, it's nice to see we are on the charts, but B, I mentioned earlier feedback loops.
Right.
So if I do a promotional intervention on a show, I can see within a day how it affects the chart position. And I can see if that's been an effective promotional activity, and therefore I know if to do more of it or to switch to something else. So again, this feedback loop that you get from either Facebook or something like Facebook or Podkite's charting ability, I think is super powerful. And that's a free tool, by the way. Podkite, go in, and that's a free tool. So I'm happy with free tools. Yeah. I'm a big fan of free tools. So those are the two things that I would say for me are worth looking at in a way that helps you build your audience.
Yeah, the promotional calendar is really cool. We sometimes forget, like, for example, here in the States, it's Black Friday is coming up. So guess what? Everybody who sells anything is thinking of a Black Friday promotion. Podcasters as well. It's like, we're going to do a training for our clients on like how to promote on Black Friday, because it's like, to your point, it's such a big opportunity for podcasters who are in the business space, or, and understanding how to do that and what dates to do. And I think that's really cool. Really, really awesome. So thank you for that. But the chat about that offline.
I hope your listeners find it useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question I have for you, Daniel, is in terms of promoting, because when I started podcasting in 2016, it was a different world. I'm sure when you started podcasting, it was a different world. If someone's starting today or right now, and maybe they're getting ready to launch in 2021, what would be, we talked about a lot of great stuff here. So I'm sure it may have already been in this episode, but if there's anything that you haven't covered that you say, hey, if you're launching in 2021 or early 2021, what would be the tip or advice you'd give to that person?
So we could do a whole episode on this, and maybe I've got like 16 different things you should do when you launch a podcast, so maybe we should come back for that one. But let me maybe give you one of those that I think is, again, maybe people know it, maybe it's obvious, maybe it's something that people do, maybe they do it without realizing it, or maybe they don't know about it. And for me, this is something that we should all be doing when we launch a new podcast, and that's what I'm going to call a subscriber party. So I don't know if that's a term you're familiar with, but it's all to do with gaming the Apple algorithm on iTunes.
Okay, is it like a launch party? Kind of. I'd love to go into this. Let's.
So in an ideal world, it's a party, and you're all in a room, and you're having beers, and your phones are all out, and you're all hitting subscribe at the same time.
Right.
But the reality is that essentially it's something you need to start doing virtually, but it's better to do it virtually, arguably, as well, because you get a wider reach. But you want to start reaching out to your friends, your family, your close associates, your business colleagues, your networks. If you're a teacher, get your class involved. Okay? Because what you want to do is you want to have, over a 72-hour period, as many new subscribers as possible. And that will see you racing up the charts. Mm-hmm. So if you're a new show and you can get a launch pad just by having 30, 40 of your friends, family, and colleagues all subscribing within 72 hours, you'll be surprised how well you do in those charts.
Yeah. I love that. That's I guess nowadays it'd be in a Zoom call, and you need some kind of like ethical bribe instead of like, hey, jump on a Zoom call with me so I can make sure you subscribe to my podcast. But I see some really cool ideas coming out of that, and just having a kind of like an open call. You invite them to, everyone subscribe at 12 or something, or whatever time the podcast comes out. That's a brilliant tip for those listening. I think the people listening to this got more than what they paid. That's for damn sure. So cool. Daniel, where can people learn more about Earplug and just get in contact with you if they want to, see what you guys have to offer?
I would love your listeners just to come and check out the site and just say hello and just offer some feedback and see if it works. Earplugpr.com, earplugpr.com, or promote my podcast.co.uk, whatever works for you. But just come along, check us out, see if we're doing something that can be useful to you. If you've got an idea, let us know. If there's a package there that you want our help with, let us know. We're young business. We're happy to help you out as best we can. And it would be great to see if there's something there that we can help you with. But it's been an absolute pleasure being on your show and having the chance to speak to you and your community. And hopefully something I've said there might resonate with somebody and help them grow their own show.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think for sure there are some things here. This needs to be transcribed and turned into a blog post. So cheers again, man. And thank you.
Okay. Take care.